name is Andre. I used to live an ordinary life and never thought that the night itself could turn into a trial that would break my mind. I had read about sleep paralysis before, articles online, people's stories, but I was always skeptical. It seemed to me like some kind of myth, a psychological trick that only frightened those who were too impressionable. But everything changed a few years ago, when I rented an apartment in an old building. The house was built back in the 1960s. High ceilings, wooden floors that creaked with every step, a long dark hallway where the draft never seemed to stop. The apartment itself was nothing special. A small bedroom, a kitchen, a tiny bathroom. But the very first night I spent there, I realized there was something in those walls that wouldn't let me rest. That first night I barely slept. I heard footsteps from the floor above. Heavy, deliberate steps, sometimes the sound of furniture being dragged across the floor. But according to the building records, the apartment above had been empty for years. I tried to convince myself that it was just the house settling, old pipes, echoes. But a seed of unease had already been planted. The second night I collapsed from exhaustion. Sleep took me quickly, but not for long. I woke up suddenly, as if someone had called my name. My eyes snapped open, and instantly I knew something was wrong. I couldn't move. My body felt like stone, pinned to the bed. I tried to raise my hand, but the muscles refused to respond. I tried to scream, but only a ragged gasp escaped my throat. And then I saw it. In the corner of the room by the door stood a shadow. It didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. Not a face, not details of clothing, just a dense silhouette, darker than the darkness itself. But this shadow knew I could see it. The fear was primal. My heart pounded so hard I could hear the thudding in my ears. I tried to shut my eyes, but even my eyelids wouldn't obey. That was when I heard breathing. Heavy, labored, like someone struggling to pull air into their lungs. It was getting closer, though I never heard footsteps. The shadow leaned over my bed. I could feel its cold breath brushing against my skin. Then came a voice, barely audible, but clear enough to freeze me inside. "You are not alone." I wanted to scream, but my body was a prison. The mattress sank beside me, as if someone had sat down. A crushing weight pressed against my chest, forcing the air out of my lungs. In my mind, broken fragments of childhood prayers surfaced, and I repeated them silently like desperate charms. And then, suddenly, it was gone. I jolted upright, gasping for breath, eyes darting across the room. Nothing. Just the dim glow of the streetlight through the window and silence. I told myself it had been a dream. But in the morning, red marks lingered across my chest, as if something had pressed its hand into me. From that night on, nothing was the same. I no longer felt safe in my own home. Every night became a test of courage. I was afraid to close my eyes, afraid of the moment I'd be helpless again before something that came out of the darkness. The following nights only made things worse. Sleep became a dangerous gamble. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to drift off. But my body always betrayed me. Exhaustion would win, and soon enough, I would wake again into that same paralyzing terror. One night, I awoke to find myself staring at the ceiling, unable to move, my chest locked in invisible chains. The shadow was there again, but this time, not by the door. It was closer. At the foot of my bed. It didn't just stand there. It swayed, as if it were breathing in rhythm, inhaling and exhaling. I could hear it, rasping, uneven, a sound that scraped across my nerves like rusted metal. I tried to blink, tried to look away, but my gaze was fixed, as if nailed into its direction. Slowly, with an unnatural grace, the shadow crept along the side of my bed. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its gaze burning into me. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat louder than the last. Then I felt it, an icy fingertip brushing my ankle. The sensation was real, too real. It slid slowly up my leg, across my knee, stopping just short of my thigh. My mind screamed, but my body stayed frozen. I wanted to believe it was just a dream, but the weight of the mattress told me otherwise. Something pressed into it as the shadow leaned over me. It whispered again, but this time, not words. It was a sound, a guttural rasp like broken glass grinding against stone. My ears rang, and for a moment, I thought I'd go deaf. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it ended. My muscles loosened, the weight lifted, and I bolted upright in bed. My skin was drenched in sweat, my breaths ragged and shallow. I ran to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, staring at myself in the cracked mirror. My reflection looked hollow, pale, terrified. I told myself it was just stress, sleep deprivation, some cruel trick of the mind. But when I rolled up my pajama leg, I saw it, faint bruises along my shin, as though fingers had gripped me tight. The days blurred together after that. At work, I was a ghost. My colleagues asked if I was sick. Dark circles carved themselves under my eyes. Coffee did nothing. Every night, I dreaded going home, but where else could I go? Friends laughed when I mentioned the apartment. "You're just overturned," they said. "Old houses creak. Brains play tricks." But deep down, I knew this wasn't just my mind. Something was happening to me, something I couldn't explain. That night, as I lay in bed with the lamp still on, I promised myself I would fight it. If the paralysis came again, I would try to move, no matter how impossible it felt. I clung to that thought as I drifted into uneasy sleep. And when I woke, trapped again in that suffocating stillness, the shadow was already beside me. The more it happened, the less I could deny it. This wasn't just fatigue or stress. Something was visiting me at night, and it was getting stronger. I tried everything I could think of. Sleeping with the lights on, leaving the TV running all night, hoping noise would drive it away, even playing recordings of rain sounds on my phone, just to calm myself. But no matter what I tried, the paralysis returned, and each time, it grew worse. One night, it was different. When my eyes opened, I instantly knew something had changed. The air in the room was heavier, thicker, like breathing through a blanket. My body was paralyzed as usual, but this time, I wasn't alone with just one shadow. There were two. The first stood by the door, its shape larger, more massive than before. Its presence filled the room like a weight pressing down on me. But the second was small. At first, I thought it was just my tired brain twisting the darkness into shapes. But no, there it was, standing right beside my bed. A smaller figure, barely the height of a child, its outline thin, jagged, wrong. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its stare burning holes into me. My chest tightened, panic surged, and I tried to scream, but only a strangled whimper slipped past my lips. The small figure tilted its head, as if curious, as if listening to the pathetic sound I had made. And then it laughed. A child's giggle. High-pitched, playful, but dripping with malice. It echoed unnaturally through the room, bouncing off the walls, multiplying until it sounded like several voices laughing at once. My blood froze. The tall figure at the door shifted. I didn't hear it move, but suddenly it was closer, towering at the foot of my bed. I could feel my body sinking deeper into the mattress, as though gravity itself had turned against me. The little one climbed onto the bed. I felt the sheets tug and dip with its weight. My breath quickened. I wanted to thrash, to throw it off, but I was locked in place. The giggling grew louder, closer, until I swore it was right beside my ear. And then, a whisper. Not a child's voice anymore. Something older, darker. "We've been waiting." My heart hammered so violently I thought it would burst. My vision blurred. My whole body screamed for oxygen, but my lungs refused to obey. Suddenly, the weight lifted. The giggles stopped. The room was silent again. I shot upright, gasping, clutching my chest, like I'd run a marathon. My sheets were damp with sweat, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The room looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still there, hiding just out of sight. That morning, I swore I heard faint laughter as I left the apartment for work. Not in my head, behind me in the hallway. And I realized something terrifying. It wasn't just happening at night anymore. No longer knew where dreams ended and reality began. Every night was torture, and I was terrified of falling asleep, because I knew it would come. That evening I went to bed with the light on and my phone in my hand. I thought it might keep me safe, but the moment I closed my eyes, even for a minute, I was trapped again. The familiar weight pressed down on me. I couldn't move, could only hear my own breath and the ringing in my ears. Then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy. They drew closer to my bed. I tried to scream, but my throat refused to obey. Suddenly, the light in the room flickered and went out. I was left in total darkness. And in that darkness, I saw them. Not one figure, not two, dozens. Black silhouettes stood around my bed, bending over me. It felt like they had agreed on something. Their heads tilted in unison, and all at once they stared straight into my face. The air grew thick, as if I were drowning. Pain shot through my chest, my heartbeat stumbling. The whispers returned, dozens of voices at once. The words were broken, senseless, but I caught one phrase. Now it's your turn. Cold fingers wrapped around my throat. They were too long, too thin, inhuman. I couldn't breathe, and the whispers grew louder and louder. And then, an explosive crack inside my head, like thunder shattering the silence. Everything stopped. I jolted upright. The light was on. My phone lay beside me. The room was empty. But when I touched my neck, red marks were there, long marks, like the imprint of someone else's hand. I ran out of the apartment without looking back. I never returned. But you know what's the worst part? Sometimes, even here in my new place, I wake up at night and feel someone standing beside my bed. And I can't help but think, they found me again. I want to tell you a story that I will never forget. It happened a few years ago, and to this day, I still don't know how to explain what I saw. At the time, I was living in a small city, working a stressful job, and I felt completely drained. My girlfriend and I thought we needed a break, so we booked a small wooden cabin up in the mountains for the weekend. The cabin was advertised as remote, quiet, and peaceful. And it really was. It sat right in the middle of a dense forest, with no neighbors anywhere nearby. The only way to get there was a long, narrow dirt road that twisted through the trees for miles. When we arrived, the weather was calm. The cabin itself was cozy. A little fireplace, a small kitchen, one bedroom. Nothing fancy, but it felt safe. We unpacked, made some food, and just enjoyed the silence. But the second night, everything changed. That evening, the sky grew dark faster than usual. A storm was coming in. The wind howled through the trees, and rain hammered against the roof. We lit some candles and decided to play cards at the kitchen table, trying to ignore the constant rumbles of thunder. At around 10 p.m., the power went out completely. No lights, no sound but the storm. We laughed it off at first. It was part of the adventure. But then I noticed something outside. Each time lightning flashed, for just a split second, I thought I saw something near the tree line. A shape, a person, maybe. But when the light faded, it was pitch black again. The first time, I thought it was my imagination. The second time, I froze. The third time, I said quietly, "Did you see that?" My girlfriend nodded. She had seen it too. We both got up and went to the window. The rain blurred everything. But when lightning struck again, there it was. A figure, standing still at the edge of the forest. Not moving, just watching. I wanted to believe it was another hiker, maybe someone lost in the storm. But something about the way it stood, perfectly still, it didn't feel right. We decided to lock the doors, just in case. Minutes passed. The thunder rolled. The storm grew worse. Then, Another flash of lightning. The figure was closer, no longer at the tree line, now halfway across the clearing, still not moving. My girlfriend whispered, "What the hell is that?" Her voice shook. I didn't answer. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. Another flash. Closer. It was now just a few feet away from the porch. I grabbed the fireplace poker and told her to stay behind me. We waited, staring into the blackness, listening to the storm. But when the next lightning came, there was nothing. The clearing was empty. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Because then, through the sound of the rain, we heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was at the door. Slow, heavy, deliberate. We didn't move. We didn't even breathe. Then silence. Another flash lit up the window. And this time, the figure was standing right outside the glass, its face pressed against it, pale and distorted, eyes too wide, watching us. My girlfriend screamed. I yanked her away from the window, and we barricaded the door with the table, every piece of furniture we could push against it. For the rest of the night, we sat in the corner of the room, clutching the poker, listening as footsteps circled the cabin. Sometimes close, sometimes farther away, always moving, always there. At some point, I must have blacked out, because I woke up to weak sunlight streaming through the curtains. The storm was gone. The cabin was quiet. I thought maybe we imagined it. Maybe it was some nightmare. But when I stepped outside, I saw them. Footprints. Huge, muddy footprints. They circled the cabin again and again, and then stopped right in front of the bedroom window. We left that morning and never went back. I don't know who or what we saw that night, but I do know this. If you ever rent a cabin in the woods and a storm rolls in, do not look outside when the lightning strikes, because you might see something, and it might see you too.
David had always dreamed of silence. For years, the city drained him, the endless noise, the constant movement, the feeling that he could never truly breathe. He wanted freedom, a place where he could be alone, far from anyone else. At 35, he finally made it happen. He bought a piece of land deep in the mountains, far from towns, far from roads, far from people. And there, with his own hands, he built a small wooden cabin. Just 2 rooms, a fireplace, a well, and solar panels to power a lamp. To him, it was paradise. At first, life was perfect. He woke with the sunrise, drank coffee on the porch, and listened to the birds as mist rolled through the trees. Days were spent chopping wood, repairing the roof, hunting, and gathering berries. Evenings were quiet, a book by lamplight, a few lines in his journal. In one of his first entries, he wrote, "I'm finally free. Here, I don't need anyone. And no one needs me. Just me and the silence." But silence, he soon realized, isn't always peaceful. The first nights brought small things. A crack of branches outside. Slow, deliberate sounds in the darkness. He told himself it was deer. Maybe foxes. The one morning, he saw footprints near the porch. Clear, sharp, human. They circled the house and vanished back into the forest. David tried to forget about it. Hunters, he thought, just passing through. But the next night, he heard it again. Footsteps, slow, heavy, moving around the cabin. And then a sound that froze his blood. Something dragged its fingers across the wall. He ran outside with a flashlight. Nothing. Just empty trees. But the forest didn't feel empty. The small things became harder to ignore. Objects weren't where he had left them. A bag of food was torn open. His knife, which always sat on the table, was now lying near the door. Sometimes, in the dead of night, he felt it. Someone was at the window, breathing. Every time he rushed outside, nothing. In his journal, he confessed, "I'm not alone here. Someone's watching me. They don't want me to see them. They're waiting." Weeks passed. Then one night, he woke to the sound of floorboards creaking inside his house. Heart racing, he grabbed his axe and stormed into the living room. Empty. The front door wide open. On the table sat something he had never seen before, an old rusty key. He wrote that night. He was inside. I don't know how, but he left this for me, to remind me he can come back whenever he wants. After that, the forest changed. Whispers drifted between the trees. Laughter. Screams. And sometimes, faintly, a voice calling his name. One evening, sitting by the fire, he heard it clearly, right behind him. Leave. He spun around. The room was empty. From that night on, he never stepped outside after dark. He locked the door, set the axe by it, and waited for the footsteps he knew would come. His journal grew more frantic. I see them at the windows. Tall shapes. Sometimes one, sometimes two. Faces hidden in shadow. They just watch. They're waiting for something. One afternoon, he found a pile of stones arranged in a strange circle. On top of it sat his mug, the one he always used in the mornings. That night he wrote, "This is not human. This is something else. And I know soon they'll come inside." Then silence. Weeks later, hunters passed by and noticed his chimney was cold. No smoke. No signs of life. Inside, the cabin looked untouched. A book lay open on the table. A plate of food sat unfinished. The lamp still stood by his chair. But David was gone. His journal lay on the floor. The last words scrawled inside. Tonight they will return. And this time they will come in. David was never found. Search teams scoured the woods for days, calling his name. Nothing. But near the cabin, they discovered the footprints again. The same prints, too large to belong to a man, too strange to belong to any animal. Some say he lost his mind and wandered off into the forest. Others believe he was taken by criminals, or worse. But those who dared camp near his abandoned cabin swear, at night, the footsteps still return, circling, slow, heavy, patient. And when the wind rattles the shutters, or something scratches along the walls, it doesn't feel like the forest at all. It feels like them. The ones who once stood at David's window waiting. And finally, taking him